What are the Vikings going to do now that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is out as general manager? We're going to talk about the potential new triangle of authority. We are going to talk about what they could do at quarterback and how, even though they changed the general manager, are we sure anything's going to change? We've got a lot of information to go through, and we're going to do it all tonight here on the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave. And we have had about 72 hours or so to digest the news that the Minnesota Vikings no longer have a general manager, as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was fired as I was walking into the Pensacola airport on Friday afternoon. And what a wild series of events, because let's kind of just lay out the generics before we really get into the nitty gritty. And first, I want to start by welcoming everybody here. We are very excited the fact that we get to talk Minnesota Vikings every single week. And please like, subscribe, ring the bell for those notifications. It is a free way to support us here. Also, if you want to support us monetarily, you will get access to the Vikings First and SKOL Discord, where I drop any and all rumors that I hear. Meaning, you get access to some fun stuff, some of which comes to fruition, which is always a good time. The only way to get that is become a paying member of the channel and join the Discord, which Dave has conveniently in the show notes. And even if you don't want to be a paying member, join the Discord. It's a lot of fun. So it was very odd, the fact that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was fired. Not because he didn't necessarily earn it, because, look, let's be real, the poor draft capital and some of the other things that have come out over the last 72 hours were the reason why he was let go. But it was very interesting, the fact that he was let go when he was. If they would have let him go within 48 hours of the season ending, I don't think anybody would have been worried about it. It wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have just been like, yeah, they were 43-25, but the success of their draft classes was so poor that they had to make a change. Okay, that is exactly the kind of thing. Like, okay, makes sense. You can at least justify it. And even if you would have waited a week, because remember, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's season-ending press conference got pushed back, I believe it was 5 days. If you would have done it in that time, I don't think anybody's too worried about it. And Mark Wilf was very honest. Hey, we make things with a very collective approach. We don't make rash decisions. We make sure we take our time and look at all the info before we make any final decisions. Well, it's certainly, based on the reporting, seemed like they made a rash decision, because, all of a sudden they're having a last-second meeting and then they decided to let him go. And the one thing that drives me nuts is the fact that they let him represent the Vikings at the Senior Bowl. And this is all going to come into play with some of the things that I'm really concerned about moving forward, because that's what this show is. Just trying to understand where we go from here. They let Kwesi Adofo-Mensah handle all the draft stuff going into the Senior Bowl. And for those of you that aren't aware necessarily of what the Senior Bowl might be, it is an all-star game, but the most important thing does not happen in front of the camera. The most important things happen are in the meetings. There's a running joke between all of us that go to the Senior Bowl that every player meets with all 32 teams. Don't ask them, because it's just a waste of your time and their time when you could potentially get a really interesting nugget. I remember Tavondre Sweat last year. I asked him what teams had told him about how he will translate to the NFL. And he said, and I quote, "They just told me to go fuck shit up," end quote. Yeah, you can get really cool stuff like that. And that tweet went decently viral, and it got a lot of really cool interaction because it's a really cool quote. And asking players, "Oh, did you meet this team?" No, it's dumb. Don't do it. But you have Adofo-Mensah handling all those interviews, leading the process, And he's not the only one down there. To my knowledge, Kevin O'Connell was not down there, which really isn't that big of a deal. A lot of head coaches don't go down there. It is more of a front office kind of event. You will have some head coaches. Mike Vrabel was reportedly going down for the game. I don't know if he did. Jim Harbaugh was there. And there were a few other coaches down on the sidelines as well. Not every coach goes. Some coaches do choose to. So the fact that O'Connell wasn't there is a really big nothing burger. But the fact that they let Adofo-Mensah go, thankfully, he was back in Minnesota when they fired him. I was opining on the show on Friday, Dave, that I wonder if he was even back in Minnesota when they chose to make the decision and they informed him, because there's a real chance he wasn't. Why? Because getting in and out of Mobile was a pain in the ass. You can see my little raccoon eyes, all right? It was a pain in the ass because, man, there were flight issues because of the weather across multiple states and multiple airports. I got rerouted out of Charlotte to Dallas-Fort Worth, and that took an extra 2 hours. Going to the Senior Bowl, I was delayed 8 hours at MSP after waking up from 4 hours of sleep. It was a challenging travel time for just about everybody. I got lucky where I know at least half a dozen high-profile draft analysts that could not make it to Mobile because of weather. So I was really concerned that, well, did they fire him over the phone? Did they fire him, while he was on the team plane? How did this go about? Well, it was reported that they did fire him face-to-face in person, which that's the kind of ownership group that the Wilfs are. They will talk to you face-to-face and they will inform you of those decisions. And they have that kind of old school respect, which I love. I've always been the kind of person to have a conversation man to man, person to person. If you have a problem with me, I will talk to you face to face. Or if I need to deliver news, I want to do it personally, because I just think that's how good business is done. Not by email, not by a text. No, person to person. So the fact they did that there was good, but it raises a lot of other questions, Dave. And I'm going to be honest with you. I intentionally did not listen to Tool bloggers yet because I wanted to come in a little blind. I did not want to come in influenced by what you and Darren had to say, and I wanted this to be more of a fresh conversation from that perspective, because I think that provides a better context for the audience, and then I don't just use those same talking points and then all of a sudden you have nothing to really respond on. So I gave you the generic list of kind of what I want to talk about, and I wanted to be able to keep the conversation fresher from that perspective. I'll listen to it tomorrow while I work. So the one thing that's really interesting for me here when we're having this conversation is the messaging around his firing. To me, is all over the place. And it's, in fairness to the Vikings, it is not all coming from them. Other organizations and other staffers are talking about the fact that, hey, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah took 2 weeks of paternity leave. But I do want to make this really important. There have been a lot of people in my mentions who are yelling about the fact that he took paternity leave. One, a lot of it's coming from an old school mentality. You just go to work and you deal with it. I think we can evolve past that old school mentality and realize, hey, just because you didn't have it doesn't mean you shouldn't have gotten it. And I love what Arif wrote in his article for Wide Left, which I highly recommend you go read. It's probably the best piece I've read so far this year. It's a student loan debate. Well, I can pay my student loans, so you should too.
That article is not behind the paywall for those that are curious. The whole article's out there.
Even if it was behind the paywall, you should pay Arif Hassan money because he's very good at what he does and he's worth it. And it's the student loan debate. A lot of people don't want the student loans to be forgiven because they had to pay them. And I think it's kind of the same thing here with paternity leave. Dave, I know you're a father. Did you get paternity leave?
I wasn't even there for for one of the births.
Yeah, I think you should have gotten.
No, we did not get paternity leave back then.
I think everybody should have gotten at least a little bit of paternity leave because it's not for you; it's for the kid. It's so important for the kid to have it.
A couple days off, but that was it, and then we had to be back at work.
I'm a very old school person where I put my nose to the grindstone and I work like a dog. And I have no problem busting my ass to do X, Y, or Z. But it's also something where, hey, I literally only called in sick on my deathbed. I'm proud of that. But if I needed a day, and when my staff needed a day and they can attest to it, like, hey, I can't. I just can't. We would try to find coverage and we would try to make it work, because just because you weren't able to doesn't mean other people can't. And I think taking paternity leave was fine. Plus, here's the one thing that drives me nuts about the paternity leave, and I'll get off the soapbox. He still worked. He still worked. He was still on his computer. He was still at home. And here's the one thing when people are like, well, how is he going to watch practice? How is he going to do all these things? I've got news for you. They record all the practices. They have practice film. They watch the practice film, because guess what? You can't catch everything on every play and practice rep. So they watch the practice film. They break it down. It's just like you have with Senior Bowl practice. They film those too. To me, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to really criticize him for it, but it's also a bigger discussion that I don't know if we're necessarily the best people to have it, because, Dave, you and I didn't play in the league. And I think having somebody who played in the league here would be a huge benefit for it, because there is a culture where, like, John Gruden was proud of the fact that he would run I think it was John Gruden, it was Adam Gase who would pound 5-hour energies and just never sleep. John Gruden would show up between 3 and 5 in the morning. Are you really going to be that much better at your job if you have no sleep and your brain runs on no function? Because if you are awake for, I think, 17 plus hours, it is the equivalent to having a blood alcohol level, I think, of, what is it, a 0.1, because you're so overtired. To me, it's too much of an old school mentality where, hey, Bruce Arians, go home, go have dinner, get a good night's sleep, and then come here. And it's about maximizing your work at the time. And him taking the paternity leave, the Vikings didn't care. But it also raises another question to where I can't end up being able to have those discussions, because I'm not in the NFL. But from an outside perspective, and somebody who has been a manager, and I think Lindsey Rhodes of Sumer Sports said it well, Kwesi took it, so guess what? He is now inviting you to take it. So, hey, your wife gives birth and you're a scout? Hey, I want to take paternity leave. Guess what? You're probably going to get it. So that being thrown in there in the article of kind of why he was being let go, I really didn't like, because I thought it was a little bit unfair. And I know people are talking in the chat about soldiers not getting to see their families. Yeah, that fucking sucks too. That's awful. Dave missed the birth of one of his kids because he's in the military serving our country. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean
the Gulf War.
That doesn't mean other people shouldn't be able to have that kind of right. And I think that in itself is a broader discussion point that I'll get off my soapbox now, but it drove me nuts that was used as a deterrent.
Did you see Ben Lieber's snippet this afternoon?
I did not. Share it with me, please.
He, and I paraphrase, that when you join the NFL, you're joining a workplace that's not like a civilian workplace. Mm-hmm. And that you're expected to excel because you have 18 weeks and everything focuses around those 18 weeks to get to the playoffs and hopefully win the playoffs. And everything focuses around that. Now, he took his paternity leave during training camp when he was required to evaluate 90 players plus people they were bringing in and rotating out and in and out twice a day during that time period. Yes, he watched stuff on his iPad, whatever, but there's no way he could be talking to people when he needed to, at the time he needed to make certain decisions or to improve the team because he wasn't there. And what Lieber is saying is, you commit to this job. This is what you want. You commit to this style of living, and you do that. There was Searles on with Collar, who talked about when he planned it, they would physically plan, this is when I need you to get pregnant. So the baby's born in the off season.
Mm-hmm.
And they would take precautions during the other times. But that was something that they had to think about. And it's because the NFL is such a unique, type A focused business that you've got to be performing at all times when you're expected to. Military is the same way. You know, when you volunteer, that you could be deployed when you have a kid born. It just happens. And you know you're going to miss it. You're going to hopefully get a video or a FaceTime now or whatever it is so that you can share, or hopefully you get emergency leave or whatever the reason is to go. But most of the time you do not. So you miss it. And then you celebrate when you get home. And that's just the way it is. And you take that into account. Is it hard on marriages? Oh, yeah. Is it hard on GMs and coaches? Oh, yeah. How many divorced and alcoholic ones are out there? There's tons, I'm sure. But you are in a business with only 32 slots to have that job. And you've got to be better than everybody else. And most people think that means you burn the extra bit. You do the 110, 150% to get there. And it's not 17 hours and then you're drunk. It's military's done all sorts of sleep studies.
I don't know.
It's once you get to 48, over 40, that you're dropped and dead. You can go 72 with help.
Yeah. I think, to me, the biggest factor here and why.
But that wasn't why he got fired.
No, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I think the biggest reason why that even came up at all was some of the interpersonal stuff, because the whole idea of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah coming in here was he was a different kind of general manager. And the NFL falls in this trap a lot. You look at the Vikings coaching hires. You go from hard-ass Mike Tice, Mike Tice, who he kind of was a hard-ass, but he couldn't control his team, to authoritarian Brad Childers, to really nice guy Leslie Frazier, to asshole Mike Zimmer, to bubbly Kevin O'Connell. You always go and hire the opposite instead of just, hey, let's get who we think the right guy is. And I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the process to go get him was a good one. Revisionist history is, like, using hindsight, it can be a really difficult thing when it comes to trying to remember what actually happened. What actually happened was Adofo-Mensah was one of the top candidates for the general manager job. He was one of the top general manager candidates, period. And the Vikings were able to get him, and it seemed like a really good idea. And I'm not going to lie, I think it was a good idea. Now, did it work? No. And I think there's a lot of reasons why it didn't work. And I want to point out one that really, really hits home, and why I don't think like the paternity leave, I think that's why it got mentioned. It's because this whole idea of collaboration, if all the reporting tells you that nobody in that building really believed in Kwesi and believed he was good enough to have the job. And it was by their actions and by everything that we're hearing about it. And some of it is, like, part of the nature of reporting is when you hear stuff, that doesn't mean you immediately tell everybody right away. And you have to be careful, because if I were to go and talk to a reporter and I'm just shit talking Dave, and I'm saying that he's the worst producer in the world, and I'm saying all this stuff, but public facing, everything's fine, everything looks good. Well, then if we end up splitting, Then all that stuff comes out. It's because you don't want to burn somebody when you don't really have all the information. You don't want to burn somebody in the building while they're there because it can completely screw you. And you could be wrong with elements, but once a decision is made to move on, whether by either party, you're going to get a lot more people who are going to start talking, and they're going to be honest with you because they don't have fear of retribution. And then you can get 2, 3, 4, 5 sources, which by the nature of who these reporters are, they're giving you multiple sources on each one of these points. It is not single source stuff, because single source stuff can easily have an agenda. But if you have 2 people from different parts of the organization saying the same thing, then it gives a lot more credence to it. And that's when you really start to get those things reported. So I hope everybody gives the beat writers a little bit of grace by not saying this stuff in real time, because if they did, all we'd be talking about is, well, why did a Ben Gessling or an Alec Lewis or a Kevin Seifert just absolutely shit talk Kwesi Adofo-Mensah? Why are they doing that? There really isn't a point. And that's why sometimes this kind of thing comes out so late. But the interpersonal relationships and the respect in the building was not there. I don't remember which report it was. It might have been, I think it was Kevin Seifert that said the Wilfs went up to him before the 24 season and be like, you need to stop being in your spreadsheets, paraphrasing, of course, and you need to go be with your people. And one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't really believe in him for this job was because he never lived the life. And like, Dave, if I were to have come in and been a colonel in the Army right away with no experience and never went through boot camp, I probably wouldn't have a lot of respect, because I'm just an overweight white Norwegian from Minnesota. I never dealt with the bullshit you did. I never learned the proper regiment that military guys have to deal with, the proper way to be respectful, salutes, all that stuff. And that's just the minimal stuff. That has nothing to do with, hey, how do I protect the man next to me from dying in combat? That's a whole nother layer of discussion. But the whole point is, I wouldn't have that respect because I never dealt with it. And one of the reasons why in an authoritarian kind of structure like that is when you have somebody who is a higher rank, the expectation is they have done the job. They have been where you've been, and they have risen to a higher rank because of their ability. Now, Adofo-Mensah comes from a different world. Now, he was in the football world for quite a while, but he was never a grinder. He was like Rick Spielman was a player. His brother's Chris Spielman, who was a very good linebacker for the Lions. Rick became a scout in the early 90s, grinded his way up, became a general manager. It did not work out. Then he went to be a director of pro personnel, and then he came to the Vikings, where he was with the Vikings for 20 years. And we'll talk about the triangle of authority because I think it might be back. There was a level of respect where all the area scouts who were away from home for hundreds of days a year, Rick gets it. Kwesi, by all the reporting, never had that because he never lived it. He was never on the road all the time. And I think that's one of the big reasons why the paternity leave was a big deal. I don't think people would have cared as much if Rick Spielman took paternity leave, because Rick lived it. He understands the grind, and there's a level of communication and respect for what that job is because he lived it. And that, to me, I think was a big reason why the paternity thing was included like that. Because look, there's a culture problem in the NFL. A GM should be able to take a quasi paternity leave by working from home. Not that big a deal. Hey, maybe go into the office a couple times, have some conversations, but always keep in contact with your people. Because remember, one of the big parts about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah coming in was collaboration, which means delegation. It really wasn't a big deal on the surface that Kwesi came from this outside world, that he wasn't a grinder, that he wasn't a football guy. Why? Because it's not about being the guy who does every evaluation. Being a good manager is about having the right people in place, having them give you all the input, and you being able to process it and then make a sound decision. It's not about, I grinded, I watched 400 players. I know everything. I'm going to make every single pick. I'm not going to listen to anybody. Like, that's not what this is. That's not what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Kwesi knowing who to listen to, knowing when to listen to them, and make a lot of those decisions. And the idea made a ton of sense because he has a Wall Street background, and then he ingrained himself into the NFL. And he did work really, really well or the idea was really well to listen to all these people and then be able to make a lot of those decisions. Analytics itself is such a broad term. If I said, what is analytics to you? The majority of you are probably going to say something like Pro Football Focus, EPA per play, which those are correct answers. But analytics is a very broad term. It's like if I were to say, what is religion? And some of you may answer Christianity. Some of you may answer Judaism. Some of you may answer Islam. But there's a lot more answers to it because it's a very broad term. And that's where the whole idea behind being an analytical GM, I think him being the quote unquote first one was a little bit of a difficult task because he's not a traditional analytics guy. He is a data guy, but his data comes from being in the market, from dealing with stocks and utilizing asset trading like that. So Kwesi, coming from that world, didn't necessarily make a lot of the analytical decisions that you would expect. Like, say, a friend of the show, Eric Eager, he now works for the Carolina Panthers. If he were to become a general manager, he would be using a lot of those principles because that is the world that he was ingrained in, where Kwesi was ingrained for years in the stock market. So even by that stance, the idea of what an analytics GM was never fit the tone of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and how he ran this organization. So even from all the reporting, analytics guys started getting off board because he's doing stuff that's pretty anti-analytics. He took a guard in the first round. He made a big trade for a tight end. He took a safety in round 1. Now, I think it's fair to remember, we all talk about Kyle Hamilton. Luke Braun mentioned this on his show, and he was right. Ben Gessling reported that if they did not trade that pick, they were taking Jamison Williams. So the Vikings were never going to get Kyle Hamilton. And the whole idea about the analytics is just by trusting your data, but it's also how you get your data and how you use it. Because if I give everybody a filet, they're going to cook it differently. Some of it's going to be better than others. And that's kind of what Adofo-Mensah was. He decided to try and find edges. And the idea of the competitive rebuild got laughed at, but it worked. They never took that massive step back. And they always tried to be competitive while they fixed the salary cap. And I think that, to me, will be Kwesi's legacy. Couldn't draft very well, but that man fixed the cap and made it very healthy. I don't care if it says we're projected to be 48 over. It's a very healthy situation that the Vikings are in. And Freddie says it in the chat, they were never getting Drake, man. It was never going to happen. Why? The Patriots were never going to get rid of him, or they're never going to trade 3. Some reporting has been that they had made a deal with Elliott Wolf, but it got nixed by Robert Kraft. Chad Graff of The Athletic, who was the Vikings beat writer for years, said no, they were never going to trade him. So those things, I think, all mattered in this conversation.
The Vikings team was not the only team that approached the Pats for that number 1 pick that year as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the idea of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as an analytics guy is both correct and misguided because the way we think of analytics was not what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah ever was. And it's a fascinating one. But I kind of want to move on because we've talked a lot about, the why behind Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. The big thing is he didn't have a lot of respect in the building for a multitude of reasons. He did not craft great relationships. And one of the other big factors was there was a lot of decisions that just didn't work. Now, I think it's fair to contextualize it. And I think it's unfair to fully judge him on it because you can only go based off the information you have at the time. Based on a lot of the decisions he made were based on good information at the time, and we all agreed with the process. Now, like the free agency classes. Great process to bring in Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Doing that instead of Milton Williams netted the Vikings a 3rd round pick. And they were able to get those guys for cheaper than Milton Williams. And it was 2. Now, you're also taking the risk with injury. Neither one of those guys really dealt with injury, so that was a humongous plus. But they didn't work out nearly to the level that you wanted for what you were paying them. But the 24 class of free agents, excellent. He did a great job of navigating the pro side, but navigating the college side was a lot harder for him. It's because the data has a lot heavier variables, and he was not able to adjust to that well enough. Here's where things get really murky for me. We're gonna get back to the data point from the college side, because I think that in itself is going to be a fascinating one to discuss. But let's talk about the quarterbacks. It feels to me, Dave, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong, Kwesi is taking the bullet for all the quarterback stuff. Am I right?
Oh, it feels that way, but he shouldn't.
He shouldn't. Why? It's widely known, and Alec Lewis said it on his show earlier today, that was all KOC. Mm-hmm. Every quarterback decision was KOC. And you know what? That's also part of the problem, because why is your general manager not being the one to make these decisions? Now, empower your people. That's part of being a good manager. You want your people to be empowered and give you the right information, but Kwesi should have been making that call because he has roster control. And then we find out that Rob Brzezinski went over his head to go make the Adam Thielen trade, which Kwesi said, no, that's not good value. No, we're not going to do that. Brzezinski did it anyway. That shows you the level of respect that they had for Kwesi in the building, which was negligible. But it feels to me, Dave, and I wrote about it earlier today for A to Z Sports, it feels to me that this is setting up that Kevin O'Connell is getting basically off scot-free for a bunch of decisions that he was in charge of. He was in charge of these quarterback decisions. He was in charge of, hey, we love J.J. McCarthy. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. These Vikings are terrible at hiding their feelings. They loved J.J. McCarthy. They loved May Moore, but they did not love McCarthy. It feels like he's getting off completely scot-free. And the 2 scapegoats of the 2025 Vikings are Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Chris Cooper. They are, the way this offseason has been set up, Mark Wilf said they're not making any more changes in the front office. Kevin O'Connell has not made any other changes, even though we want Matt Daniels. We talked about Josh McCown and Wes Phillips. Those guys are all staying. There are 2 scapegoats here. It is Chris Cooper and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And I just think that's crappy. Because Kevin, if J.J. McCarthy fails, in my opinion, Kwesi's absolved. This is all KOC. It is all Kevin O'Connell. To me, that is a very difficult one. Because Kevin O'Connell is supposed to be his quarterback guru. And look, it's hard to find a quarterback. But if it doesn't work, you can't blame Kwesi anymore. This is all you. All of it's you. And I'm very interested because of how all this has played out. All of the PR stuff, like reporters saying, oh, this, that, or the other thing. That one of the things that was reported, I believe, was that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah just wanted to go with J.J. McCarthy and not go prioritize a Rodgers. They did offer Daniel Jones more money. And outside of Kevin O'Connell saying, you're the starter next year, I'm not even giving J.J. McCarthy a shot in training camp. You're the guy. He was never coming here. The money didn't matter. They offered way more money than the Colts, and he still said no. Why? Because he wanted to play. So O'Connell getting off scot-free, to me, is just wild. But one of the reasons why I think that's important is when you look at the totality of the picture. I think that this could be, and we'll find out if it becomes reality, but this is my theory right now. I think that this might be Kevin O'Connell realizing that J.J. McCarthy is not the guy, and I can dump him with a get-out-of-jail-free card. I don't have to worry about retribution because I just blamed it all on Kwesi. Like, if they got rid of J.J. McCarthy right now, and it would go against the idea of, hey, organizations fail young quarterbacks for young quarterbacks fail organizations. Everybody knows how I feel about that quote because I think J.J. McCarthy has failed the Vikings just as much as the Vikings may have failed him because he hasn't been available on the field. And being available is about 80% of quarterback play. If you can't play, nothing else matters. So if they move on from him, and this isn't me making an argument whether to do that or not. I want that to be clear. This is me opining about, hey, what does this future look like in a post-Kwesi Adofo-Mensah world? I think it could be a real opportunity, Dave, for the Vikings to make a move like that. Because where's the retribution? Where's the retribution? It ain't coming.
Oh, they'd have to still have to get it right. KOC is going to be on the hot seat this year.
Oh, he's on the hot seat big time because guess what? He put all the blame on two people. That's my perception of it. He puts the blame on two people. Now, we're going to see how things pan out. I want to address this from Freddie in the chat. Now we're $40 million over the cap. How do we fix this? Freddie, do I have a show for you? We talked about this in depth a couple weeks ago. I'll send Dave the link here so he can throw it in the chat because we talked about it 2 weeks ago. It's
we did.
Yeah, you know what? It was a good show. But I think one of the big things here, and I'm really concerned, Dave, that moving on from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does absolutely nothing. And let me kind of explain why. If you had a guy in Kwesi who you didn't really respect and you didn't listen to, and Rob Brzezinski was going over his head to make moves, and you have a lot of the same high-powered people still in the building from the Rick Spielman era, how are we supposed to expect anything is going to change? Now there's rumors of George Payton, Spielman's right-hand man, coming back and running the show. How am I supposed to sit here and believe that we just made changes for the better? And you know what? That doesn't mean Kwesi should have kept his job. I think he's being scapegoated too hard. I think his overall body of work was way less bad than a lot of people are making him out to be. The whole vibe is everything Kwesi did was bad. Everything that was good for the Vikings had nothing to do with Kwesi. And R.M. in the chat says, I'm really concerned that Ryan Grigson is still in the building. Yeah. He was Kwesi's right-hand man. But Washington, I think he's the director of pro scouting. He's still there. There's some high-ranking officials in the front office who are still there, including Rob Brzezinski. So as much as we want things to change, are we sure they're going to? Are we sure that Kwesi didn't bring in enough of his own people to make this in his image? I'm not convinced. And here's why I'm not convinced. Rob Brzezinski has been in charge of drafts before. Dave, I know you remember, but I want to challenge this to everybody else. Do you remember the triangle of authority? Rick Spielman, Rob Brzezinski, and either of Brad Childress or Leslie Frazier?
It didn't start out with Rick Spielman. It started out with Fran Foley.
How long ago was Fran Foley?
2006.
Oh, that was the year Rick Spielman came into the organization.
Yeah. It was Fran Foley was hired as GM. The Wilf said we're setting up the triangle of authority, which would have been Fran Foley, Rob Brzezinski, and Brad Childress.
Yep.
Well, it was a day before or after the draft, they found out something disparaging about Fran Foley and they fired him.
That's right. I had forgotten about that.
And then Rick Spielman got the promotion to I think, vice president of football personnel or whatever it was.
Yeah. Look.
But they ran with it, and Childress had the overall control of the roster. He had the final say.
Mm-hmm.
He was the captain then.
Yeah, what a great captain that was. Holy shit.
Got us to NFC Championship despite Childress.
Yeah. My big thing here, Dave, is I don't see how we can expect this to be any different. Because Brzezinski, he's been in NFL front office for years, and he understands how to maneuver the cap, how to build a roster from a financial perspective, and he's great at it. Nothing he does is really revolutionary. Like, he's not, like, he did help create the poison pill, I guess. But a lot of it is just really smart maneuvering. It's like a good accountant who can help save you a bunch of money on your taxes.
And you want that. And every NFL team needs that.
I want it. I think you should do everything you can to keep him. I think he should be a candidate to be the general manager. But
does that evaluate talent? And because he can massage the cap and make money go where it needs to go.
This is going to be a hot take.
Does that mean he qualifies to choose personnel?
This is going to be a hot take, but I don't care if my general manager is a scout. And that might come off as stupid, and I'm okay with that. I didn't care that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah wasn't a scout, because it's not about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah being a scout. It's about being able to hire the right people who know what they're doing and be able to make decisions based off that. You go into this, you guys know how much I love metaphors, all right? You go into any restaurant, the general manager is not going to be a top 10 server or a bartender or a cook in that building. Why? They are good enough at everything to be competent, and they're good leaders, and they know how to position their people. That's what I want my general manager to be. I want to have a great scouting staff that I can trust to make all these selections. I want to have a great pro personnel staff where, hey, I think Andrew Van Ginkel could be a star for us. Let's get as much information as we can. That is what I want out of my general manager. Part of the problem with Rick Spielman at the end was his scouting became a little too arrogant. That's when we had the disastrous third round of 21. That's how we got Kellen Mond. And that's how he didn't talk to the head coach for a year. Because my opinion matters more. Well, guess what? It's good to have conviction. I've had conviction on guys. I've been right, I've been wrong. But there's this thing, and why so many teams use Arif Hassan's consensus board for background purposes. It's because there's wisdom in crowds. I thought Quincy Riley was the 28th overall player in that class. Consensus board had him around 100. Now, if I'm right, I'm the outlier. We've seen
PFF's big board, and Drew Bunting would go, you have this tight end at number 32? Are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
And PFF had him ranked that high. Did he go that high? No, he didn't. But yes, you're correct. That's why the consensus big board that Reef puts together is probably the best product when we're going into the draft to use. Now, it doesn't come out in full until about a week before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about having the right people in place, being able to trust them, and using their information to make informed, quality decisions. The best general managers have those people. The whole thing of the job is you need to have great people underneath you to give you the information. You still have to do work, and I'm not saying you don't. But Kwesi Adofo-Mensah doesn't have to be a scout. Rick Spielman doesn't have to be a cap guy. You have people to help you and fortify. And the whole idea of collaboration was a really, really smart one, and why I don't blame the Vikings, and I don't think they deserve criticism for why they made the hire. But you have to have the right people in place. And it was evident that the Adofo-Mensah did not have the right people in place because, one, they made a bunch of poor decisions. And 2, well, maybe he should have hired enough of his own people, because there's still a lot of those Rick Spielman people in the building. And, well, it didn't go well at the end either. Freddie asked the question, is it true Kwesi paid for PFF to help figure out the draft? I'm going to say this because I think it's important to understand what PFF really is. To you and me, the only things that we see from PFF are the public-facing stuff, the grades, the pressures, the big-time throws. PFF is so much more of a company than that. They do business-to-business kind of stuff that is not public-facing, that we don't see. So, yes, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the other 31 teams use Pro Football Focus, but it's for back-end data that's more advanced and easier to parse through than having to look for it all manually. So they do use PFF, but it's not the PFF you're thinking of. And I think that got lost in translation. To me, I think that's fine. I don't really have an issue with using PFF, because remember, PFF is a data company. You still have to be smart enough to interpret it. You have to be smart enough to use it correctly. And Steven in the chat says, who put all those so-called right people in place? To me, I think that and the interpersonal relationships are the 2 biggest reasons why Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does not have a job, because he didn't have the right people in place. If you don't have the right people in place, you're listening to the wrong people, and you're going to make poor decisions more often than not. It's frustrating. The fact that the Vikings are here, the fact that, hey, this could have gone way, way better, but it didn't. Overall, I think this is going to go down as an unfortunate period for a lot of different reasons. My big thing with Dave is I think people are going to focus so much on every single negative thing he did and not remember that he was responsible for a lot of good. I tweeted, I think at the time the Vikings were 37-21 with Adofo-Mensah as the general manager. They're not going to fire him. Well, they did. But record-wise, 18 games over 500 in 4 years and you're losing your job is crazy. But there were other things at play.
That's where it comes down to you've got 18 teams or 32 teams. Yeah. 32 teams playing to win a Super Bowl. There's only X number of games you can play. Not everybody can. There's only X number of wins you can get. And everybody's trying to max it out. Not everybody can do that. So you've got to be able to compete at the highest level. You've got to do a little bit extra to do that. And a little bit extra may be working the extra hours, but it definitely means having the right team with you, being it front office, cap guys, scouts, pro scouts, college scouts, analytic department, coaches, strength guys, health and wellness guys. All that needs to be top notch. And then you've got to hit on the players on top of that. They've got to perform, not get injured, have the ball bounce right. The whole works for you to do that. And when you have somebody that you think's a great idea, this will work, it doesn't, and then you figure out, well, it's because of this, and this, or a combination of all of it being real minuscule when you take it one at a time. But when you pile that up all into one pile, it becomes a big thing. Then you got to move on.
Yeah.
And whether he got coup d'etat from the beginning, when Kwesi wanted Jim Harbaugh as the head coach and was told no. Whether Kwesi wanted to bring in different sort of scouts or processes and was probably told no. I don't know. I can suspect. You're hamstringing yourself straight from the get-go. And that's what I'm afraid the Wilfs did, or the organization did. They wanted to think outside the box, but they wanted to be to conform to the box. And they made him conform to the box. It just wasn't going to work.
And we'll leave it at this. I think that's a really good way to end it. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah took the job, and he had to run a vision that wasn't his. I think that's just as much on the Wilfs as it is on Kwesi. Kwesi, if you weren't going to get to run your vision and you had to run somebody else's, maybe you shouldn't have taken the job.
But like I said, it's one of 32 jobs.
And that's probably why he took it. Mm-hmm. Because you may never get another chance to have one of these jobs.
And as a GM, it's highly doubtful. Once you're fired, you're usually done.
Yeah. But that, Dave, is our show. I do think this new triangle of authority that I kind of hinted at is probably going to be Rob Brzezinski, Kevin O'Connell, and Brian Flores in some capacity. I think the fact that Brzezinski was named the interim GM over Ryan Grigson is a really important one.
I think it shouts.
Yeah. I think I'm worried about the fact that George Payton continues to be linked to this job. Maybe you should kind of go outside the building and
go with you on that one.
Go with the scout. If you want to go hard pivot again, go with the scout. Sure. But maybe don't get George Payton. I mean, I would love a franchise cornerback. Remember that quote? Mm-hmm. Well, he was right. Pat Surtain rocks. He's a top 2-3 corner in the league. But look, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's tenure is going to be looked at really negatively. And I think some of it's valid and some of it is completely unfair because he did a lot of good things. And we can't have it where Kwesi did everything bad, despite what narratives will want to tell you, and that everybody else did everything good. So it's a difficult one here. The Vikings are in a bad spot, and they're going to have a lot to figure out. First of which, quarterback. Because remember, I actually think it's smart that they're not trying to hire a new GM right now. Hire the GM after the draft, because remember, coaching contracts kind of go from January to January. GM contracts go from like mid-May to mid-May. Why? Because their year ends after like rookie minicamp. So waiting on that, I'm fine. That is our show. Thank you guys so much for joining us here tonight. Ryan Grigson is not trying to trade our first rounder for Trent Richardson. Thank God. We're going to be back later this week on Thursday to talk. Hopefully we'll have another episode of SKOL Search coming out. I'm going to record a bunch more for Dave over the next week so we can continue to get those out. Sorry we didn't get a live show last Thursday, but I hope you enjoyed the wide receiver SKOL Search. We're going to talk. DFS coach talked about the assistant hires. We're going to talk about that on Thursday. I wanted to talk about it today, but this Kwesi stuff, I think, is a much bigger story because it's so much deeper than just Kwesi bad, KOC good. Because I'm not convinced that the Vikings fixed anything yet. They have to show me that they fixed it. Because if it was really Kwesi just responsible for everything, then why did you go over his head to make roster moves? Why did not a lot of people have respect for him in the building? Well, if that's the case, then just removing him just automatically, we're hunky-dory. I don't buy it. Let's see what happens. Let's see how they move forward. Dave will share on Wednesday that he will be live on Who Will Be King. Make sure you check that out in the post section.
It's going to be the frustrated Chicago sports fans, and Pay's already sent me a message. We're going to talk a lot of Vikings on Wednesday.
There we go. And then don't forget 2 Old Bloggers this weekend. That one might be a Saturday show. Or are you going to do Sunday?
No, it's Sunday. It's Sunday at 11.
Sunday morning right before the Super Bowl. And on top of that, who knows? Maybe there will be some more breaking news that we'll go again. But there's going to be a lot more SKOL Searches coming. And hopefully I don't have to wake Dave up from his nap again.
One thing Darren and I said yesterday was it's never a dull moment being a Vikings fan.
No, it's not. No, it's not. My next up for positions, I'm going to start watching defensive tackles. I know that's a position a lot of people want to see. And we've got a lot of corners and wide receivers. Wide receivers, well, because of what my job title is at A to Z Sports. And, well, corners because the Vikings need them. And then, yeah, we're going to keep going on prospects. We're going to keep talking about them. And we'll do a mock draft here soon. But until then, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell for those notifications. And members get access to the special channels in Discord. You're going to want to have that, especially as free agency comes around. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching the Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!